Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CoSM Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler James Berger. In this episode, I have a discussion with Ramin Nazer. Ramin is a comedian, podcaster, and illustrator who has become well known for his vibrant and viral comics that carry concise and profound philosophical insights into pop culture and the human condition. So, without any further ado, please welcome Ramin Nazer. You start creating this unique style of comic art?
I've always been a doodler. Like if you look back at old notebooks and stuff in school, like next to the equations that should have been filled out or the grammar stuff that should have been filled out, there's little drawings of just whatever. One thing that I've always been doing that I really haven't put together till now was I would always stack stuff on top of each other and create this like layered look, which when I tried to draw elements individually and then stack them on top of each other, it didn't work the same. It didn't have the same aesthetic. I learned that you have to like draw it all at once. So basically, always been a doodler. I started drawing comic strips in my college newspaper. I used to make like, $10 a strip. And I remember thinking that, oh, that's so cool. It's like I can draw a $10 bill. And I haven't, if I had to draw an actual $10 bill, that would take more time than to draw one of these cartoons. And I enjoy drawing the cartoons. And it's a nice creative exercise. Not that it's all about the money, because of course there's not much money in art if you're just going for the art. But I think there is money in doing what it is that makes your heart sing, like actually following your bliss and sticking with it through the dirt for years, through your family not liking it, through you questioning yourself, to the apathy of the world, all of that. You have to really go through that, not like listen to a motivational talk and find a shortcut. Actually question yourself for so long that you get acclimated to it. You're like, oh, this again? I'm going to go through this pattern of questioning myself. So
did you ever come to a point, because your art, you have such a unique style, a unique voice that shines through your art. Did you ever, in the process of creating, ever have an aha moment when you just decided, wow, I have something here. I found my voice?
I would say it's happened in it's happened many times. Like it happened with, let's just stick to the visual art aspect of it. When I was drawing the cartoons at first, I started out in kind of a Far Side kind of method, and then I started to draw some 3-panel ones. Then the 3-panel format really resonated with me, and I started to stick to that for however many years. Then I stopped that, and I started to get really into stand-up comedy. I was really into Mitch Hedberg and George Carlin and countless others, but that just became what I wanted to put all my time into. I kind of stopped doing the visual art thing, except for when I was making posters about my stand-up comedy shows. And I wasn't making many cartoons. Although in the back of my head, I was never like, I'm done with this. It was always like, oh, I need to keep up the cartoons. I need to keep up the thing. And then before you know it, years go by. Back to the resistance thing. It's never like we quit something. It's we put it on the back burner and then it atrophies. So then I stopped doing that. And then, when did it come back? I think once it came back heavily once I noticed that we have shifted into the phone. I like to talk about apocalypses and how there's, we're in this 2020 apocalypse. There was the apocalypse of the 60s where nothing was in color and everyone wore suits. And then all of a sudden psychedelics, long hair, just civil rights, all this stuff exploded. That's an apocalypse. 9/11, another apocalypse. These are not good or bad. It's just this huge change. And I see the 2012 and the 2010s as a smartphone apocalypse where we went from going online to shifting to sometimes going offline, where we're most of our time is spent on the internet. We're on the internet right now, and it doesn't count because we're talking to each other, and it's not jumping around the place. But I started to notice that we're spending so much time looking at our phones. I really need to start communicating through this device, not pictures of your food, not selfies, which there's a place for that. I just don't see my my place as pictures of my ass or twerking or anything, but I'm very grateful for all the people that do that. And so I started to, I had just moved to Los Angeles. I didn't have any money, and I was very worried about how I would pay the bills and that kind of thing. And so I would write these like little affirmations on the wall just to myself, like that would resonate with me until they lost their juice, and then I would take it down and put up a new one. And then for some reason, like one of them I really wanted to make into a image, and I decided that I don't know why I wanted to share it. Maybe I was just listening to a lot of Seth Godin and Gary Vee and Brene Brown and, all that, like, and Alex too, because Alex and Allyson, both of them, they both bring so much value in terms of when you're feeling down about art and you're like, oh, does this have any point? You just listen to them for 15 minutes. You're like, fuck, this is more important than anything earthly. This is a cosmic importance. It's very important, not to get egotistical about it, but important in that it's a service. But so I decided to share basically the less funny stuff and the more affirmational stuff that resonated with me. I felt like it was cheesy. Should I post this? But then back to the motivational people who say like, no, vulnerability, good. Embrace vulnerability, push out. And then to my surprise, it resonated a lot. Like a lot of people liked it. So I started to kind of go down that path.
Because you saw the response. And you immediately saw that this style lended itself well to the digital landscape that we're immersed in.
But then there's also the trap of where if you get a good response, then you learn what type of content does well. So then you start to, there's like recurring motifs that you then get sick of, and then you have to ask yourself, am I doing this because I want people to give me attention, or do I want to do this because I'm actually expressing something? And that's something you have to check yourself on every day.
Yeah. Well, you want to find the intersection between both of those things. You want to find something that is congruent with what you feel is your own voice, but also something that is being received positively by the world. Where you create your heart's desire, and other people also find value in that for themselves.
Exactly. And when you say finding your voice, the voice can be a trap too, because once you've found your voice, then if you're saying something outside of your voice, then you're acting out of character. And we see it with, Bob Dylan playing the electric guitar at the Forum or whatever that story is, where he was known as a folk guitar player when everyone started to play electric. And then when he shifted to electric, he got booed off the stage, but then in the long arc of his career, that was a good move. And we see this time and time again when artists start to, shed their past self. Like Bowie did a lot. David Bowie would do a tour and he would be in a completely new costume, completely new character, completely new album, and then people are still showing up as Ziggy Stardust, and they're like, oh shit, we missed the memo. We're still stuck in the 60s. And he was all about moving forward, ascension, that sort of thing. He's ascended now.
Yeah, I mean, like, luckily for you, you mentioned like doodling has always been part of your creative output. It just seems like one of the ways that your brain loves to express itself. So, I mean, I'm sure you don't feel trapped per se by your cartooning and how well and how successful that's been on social media. You seem to be someone who has found that awesome intersection, while also like your cartoons are like, it's like a gateway drug into your podcast, into your video games, into all the other stuff you offer on your website. So it's cool that you've found such a fertile intersection.
Thank you. The problem, though, which is not a problem, it's a good problem to have, but I still beat myself up a lot because of the imbalance at times. Like, for example, the games, like 2 of them don't work anymore because I haven't updated the libraries on Apple Developer, and I need to renew my Apple Developer account, and there's all this little admin stuff that I don't like to do, so things fall apart sometimes. And yeah, it is a mix of the creativity part and then the admin part, the saving the file, uploading it to these platforms, learning the nuances of these platforms, because you don't want to, behave on each platform exactly the same. Like people can tell that you're using a Hootsuite to just push out stuff, and it's easy to mute people. It's not difficult to lose. I lose people sometimes. Like I had a channeler on my podcast, and people left. And
Too woo-woo or something.
yeah, which I don't know why, because I've always been woo-woo. I've always been, Duncan Trussell Family Hour, Alex Grey, Tom Campbell, all this stuff. I've always been that guy. And I go into this sometimes, but I think it's because I had very scientific materialist, not materialist as then they only care about materials. I mean, like in that, not woo-woo parents, science parents as opposed to woo-woo parents. So then I'm craving the woo-woo. Whereas people that grew up with too much woo-woo are like, please give me some Richard Dawkins and some Sam Harris and some atheism. Like, come on, concrete physical reality, let's go. And
well, that's when it becomes so important to stick to your voice, stick to what you want to put out there, because of course you want to be responsive to your audience, but also you can't let them dictate how you express yourself. It is such a tricky balance. Like, even though you might post something that is a little woo-woo, or you might post a comic that people don't necessarily jive with, who are more material rationalists, like if you feel like, a lot of artists have this sensation of, oh, I need to make this, I need to share this. It's almost like a bubbling up from their subconscious that they need to share this thing with the world. And it's important to listen to that sometimes, even if it's not like well received. There's that, story about the Beatles getting rejected by like multiple record companies before they got their, big break. It's like, and then they exploded and became a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah. And how about, like, you bring up the Beatles, how about the people that didn't even get to see their success? Like, didn't Van Gogh die without having sold a single painting? It might not be Van Gogh, but there's plenty of artists that, like a single sketch of theirs is worth more than like a house in Manhattan now, and they couldn't afford a loaf of bread until their dying day. Like, they just weren't, maybe, I mean, it's not everyone, and hopefully not, but your destiny might not be to see the fruits of your labor appreciated. Like, you might have to do it for an extremely long game, if that's what's in you. It's a question I get a lot, which I have trouble answering, and I actually don't answer it because I feel like I feel like I can help people a lot if they have ideas and they don't know how to express it, share it, they have the fear thing. I feel like I can walk them through that. But people who say, where do you get ideas from? I'm like, oh, you might not need to be in this business. Maybe you should be in the execution business, because ideas are like, I feel like we all have ideas. You get them in the shower, you get them right before you go to bed, you're driving. Oftentimes when you're not sitting down and it's a not optimal scenario to write stuff, that's when ideas come. And we throw them out. We're like, oh, that's not that good, but we should save every little scrap and see if it still has that glow in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a year.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. That's a good segue into, I wanted to pick your brain on your flow, your creative process, and when these ideas come to you. One of your comics, the caption is, "My only goal is to be in the flow. Everything else will come naturally." And that reminds me of another quote by a guy named Robert Henry, who wrote a book called The Art Spirit. He says, the goal is to not make art. The goal is to be in the state that makes art inevitable. So how do you get into the state that makes art inevitable?
Well, it starts with little obvious things. I think getting rest is important. Physical exercise is important. If you're bound to a wheelchair or something, then disregard all of this. But you can still exercise in a wheelchair. You can still do anything. But I feel like it's important to make sure that you're not struggling with frustration inside, like that you kind of, it starts at a micro level. Like, how can you feel good in this microsecond? How do you feel good in this second? How do you feel good for the next 5 seconds? How do you reconcile with this minute? And then after you get to the minute, it's like, okay, I can handle this next 10 minutes. But to get in that flow, it changes every day. I mean, I could try to come up with some tactics, but I know that my own tactics stop working on me. Like, I'll get really into a productivity app that lets you look at your streak of how often you do something every day, and then that gets the brain going. Until it doesn't, then it's not good anymore. Listening to podcasts of your favorite artists, musicians, interviewers, that kind of thing, that gets me going. Till it doesn't. I think it's like back to another mechanism. It's the search for novelty and finding the balance between habit and novelty. And then if you can find new novelty to put in your life, that's important, because we often find stuff we like and then we just kind of wear it out, like your favorite record or your favorite book or something. And you should try to surprise yourself. Like, remember the first time you heard a song you loved or saw some art you really loved. Like, what are you doing today to try to seek that out? I don't know how far from the question I came from that. Like,
well,
how to get in that flow.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point where like creativity or creative inspiration sometimes seems to be a byproduct of novelty, a byproduct of new experiences. So you're just seeking out new experiences. It just kind of gets the gears going in your brain a little bit.
And the habit and novelty thing, it's so easy to put habit in the category of evil and novelty in the category of good, but habit can be your friend when it's like in, I don't know, a teammate of novelty, I guess, because since we're creatures of habit, yeah, if you do something 3 days in a row, you're locked in, like even hard stuff, yoga, exercise, cold shower, those kinds of things. Like once you're on day 4, it's like you're more likely to do it than you are not, because the habit is like, yeah, just do it. Although it's hard to put yourself in that place now, especially if you're, let's say you really want to release your music, but you haven't done it yet. So you're on day 0. You cannot imagine being in a state where it's more likely that you'll press submit than it is to keep it on a hard drive somewhere. But once you're on that day 4, that first step really is the hardest. And like, there's so many books about it. We talk about the War of Art, Stephen Pressfield, Seth Godin, Brene Brown, all those people. And I was looking through one of those bargain book bins outside a coffee shop forever ago, back when you could go to buildings. And there was a book called like Do It Now, and it's from the 60s, and it's the same shit as War of Art, worded differently. Like, this has been around forever. The struggle of motivation resistance is not a recent phenomenon because of internet or anything. Like, we've always gotten in our own way, whether it's masking it with booze, drugs, TV, sex, all of that. There's a place for all that stuff, but not when it's fighting the thing you want to get out.
Yeah, I mean, and to speak to the whole habit and novelty thing, I think habit, yeah, sometimes people look at that as evil, but habit is also discipline. You need to have the habit of showing up. There's that saying, sit down and write in the same place every morning so the muses know where to find you.
So I think that does work for some people, but I wanted to devil's advocate that, or at least just my personal anecdotal experience where I never sit and write in the same spot. I mean, of course, it's always in my apartment because I'm not going to go to my neighbor's apartment or something. But the writing part, I feel like with ideas, the idea should be sloppy. It shouldn't be written in a Google Drive document in perfect Times New Roman font. Like, it should be on napkins, Post-it notes, random books that you intended for one purpose, but then since the idea came to you while you were in the planner, now the planner is an idea book, and the planner it's mutated. And I know this sounds very chaotic. I've got friends that are type A and love to write at the same time and date everything they write, and their penmanship is so aligned. Like, I think that works with their brain, but I'm just trying to present the other idea for people who might not have that style, in case the sitting in one place, they're just staring at a blank sheet of paper. But the idea part should be the most like sloppy, just generated out in every direction. And then when it's time to bring her home, that's like when you should sit down and do the composing, writing, like when you're in that mode, because there's a creative mode, and then there's the kind of mindless doing mode. Like when I'm coloring and stuff, I don't feel that as being very creative. It's like I like to listen to a podcast and then you go and fix the mistakes and that kind of thing. I bet I do a lot more mistake fixing than Alex and Allyson, because they're such like master traditional artists, and I'm this like 2020 artist that has Photoshop, Creative Cloud, and I can like go fix any fuck ups I have. And
it takes years of habit to get into a place where the mistakes are minimal. But what you were talking about reminds me of a quote by Ernest Hemingway, where he says, "Write drunk, edit sober."
Yeah.
And that is, I think, a perfect encapsulation where you kind of have these moments of kind of sloppy inspiration where you just want to work with the soup of creative thought, but then, yes, edit sober, bring in the boundaries of the sober mind, to bring form into it, and to bring your judgment mind into it, and bring your kind of frontal lobe into the equation.
Do you know Doug Stanhope, the comedian?
Yeah.
It reminds me of a bit of his. I mean, of course, Hemingway predates Stanhope, but he says that alcohol, like gives him what is it? It's drugs give him the ideas. Cigarettes give him the focus to write it down and compose it neatly, and then alcohol gives him the courage to come speak it in front of all you people. Which I don't smoke cigarettes or really drink alcohol. I'm not sober, but I don't remember the last alcohol I had. It's like 6 months ago, 8 months ago. I used to drink. I was arrested for a DUI like when I was 21. And I used to, go to bars and that kind of thing. And then luckily I grew out of it. I don't have the addictive bug in my head people that have that, they have a much harder time quitting things. But luckily I get tired of stuff. So I don't even, when Hemingway says write drunk, like we don't even mean get drunk. We just mean the metaphor of
alcohol. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can it can be a trap to get into, tweaking your psychopharmacology through any kind of substance in order to be creative, because then you, of course, develop a dependency on that. And it becomes integrated and it can become hard to break. I see what Doug Stanhope is saying, though. He's like he's pulling some almost mechanic-like tricks on his brain to kind of push some things out. But that's cool. Also, just to get back to your cartoons, you mentioned that you would put affirmations on the wall, and then you would want to sketch those affirmations. All of your comics, they have a really kind of succinct image with a short sentence dispersed somewhere in the image. That is very affirmation-like. Do the words come first and then you create the image to match the words? Or do you ever get a thought of an image that you then match the words to?
They both come at the same time. Sometimes the words first, sometimes the image first, and then I figure out words with it. But often it comes as one thing, and sometimes entire books will come as one thing, and it's like, oh my God, how am I going to write that down? Because it doesn't come in words, it's hard to describe. I know many people refer to them as downloads, I just got a download yesterday about blah, blah, blah. People I know who are very, intuitive, psychic, channeler, those types of people, they refer to it as downloads. And it recently occurred to me that, so we used to download MP3s and save them to our hard drive. And as humanity is kind of ascending with each decade and things are getting more connected and stranger, it's almost like we've left the realm of downloading stuff. And now ideas are just kind of, you stream them. You don't need to download ideas and save them to your hard drive. Just tune into it, stream into it right there, which some people's Wi-Fi right now only has 1 bar or 2 bars, or getting that bar up is a very tricky process. It's an individual process. I don't have a solution for everyone, don't have a solution for myself. I recognized a while back that this is a everyday thing, even depression. It's you don't get to hack your depression. You have to figure it out every day, like a video game, a new level. The puzzle is different in every level, but you can still use tools that you've developed and acquired in previous levels to move forward. But the puzzle is still different, and sometimes none of those tools are going to work, and you have to make new tools. I can't help but half go into McKenna sometimes. It's it doesn't even sound like McKenna.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Now, when you create art, do you ever experience your ideas coming through you rather than from you?
Oh yeah, always. I don't think there is a from me, unless the me we're referring to is the source, And yeah, that's what the source fractal of all everythingness is. It's not knowing oneself, thyself, the me, it's the one. And one is not like, we think of one like, oh, that's so lonely. One just sitting there in the middle of space. That's still two, because then you've got one and you've got the space it's floating in. Oneness is the fucking whole everythingness. In that book, The Law of One, they talk about how infinity, the concept of infinity, is not many. Like, many is a number. It's a finite thing, even if you're talking about gazillions, trillions. Infinite is not many. Infinite is the whole everythingness that we're all connected to in the at the base level, which is why we can have crazy supernatural experiences, because you have the whole universe inside of you.
Now, why would this force of oneness have any desire to fuel you with creative inspiration? So you create these cartoons and put them on Instagram.
Ooh, because the one source consciousness is all about the next level. Like it makes, okay, so there's nothingness. They're like, okay, this kind of sucks. Let's make electrons, just an electron soup. Pretty cool. What if we had protons, hydrogen? What if we had the hydrogen mixing up with different things, bonding together, forming relationships between the different things, and then it's building upon that. It starts to make, single-celled life eventually after billions and billions of years, after the stars and all that kind of stuff. Then it starts to make multicellular life. And the interesting thing is that as it builds upon itself, the old shit is still there. Like, because there's, nitrogen doesn't mean that hydrogen stopped being made. Like, there's still hydrogen, there's still nitrogen, there's still single-celled life, there's still primitive life, there's still people living like it's 1995, there's still people living like it's the 1800s, there's different levels of Amish. Even you and I, we're not even the cutting edge technology like right now. Like, maybe our computers are 2 years old, maybe we're using a calendar app that there's a better one, but we haven't figured it out yet. So have you heard that quote, the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed?
No, I haven't. But
It's all here already. But basically, like, the universe wants to create more and more, like, and it goes on forever. And the relationships between all the different parts of it are intertwined. And I mean, just think of music you like, or friends, or something like that. It's all like, they're all hominids. They're all these primate things, and from far away they're the same, but to you they're so different. Like, and we can look at them all on social media. We like swipe through all of them. We're like, oh, these people are all so different, but like I like them in such different ways, and I'm glad they're all here. And that's not going to stop. It's going to get crazier to the Westworld point of where there's going to be different iterations of you and I, of Alex, of Allyson, like different paths of forking it out.
Yeah, but so you're saying kind of at the bottom of it all, there is this cosmic creative force that from the single cell organisms to us talking over Zoom right now, it's exerting influence through creative inspiration, at least that's how we experience it, to gain in levels of complexity towards what?
I guess through like the cheesy answer, because this word sucks now, it's love as opposed to fear. I'm borrowing from Tom Campbell right now, the simulation guy, who talks about how it's always a struggle between fear and love is seeing the whole universe as one thing and you're part of it, so to help yourself and the whole world, and fear is seeing yourself as separate from the whole world, so you're just trying to keep all your resources, keep it away from the rest. It's about me versus the rest of everything. And I don't know, man, if you go up against you versus everything, everything's going to win eventually. Even if you hold it at bay for like 100 years, everythingness is going to win. Which I don't mean sell all your possessions right now. I mean sell 2 of them. But it boils down to the more complexity and the more evolved the whole system is, the less entropic it is. Entropy being like it just falls apart, like random bits of information. Like, think of what's more important to you, like a photo of a loved one or random pixels. It's the same amount of pixels on the screen, but let's say it's the only photo you have of your mother. Your mother died, and like you can't make a 3D version of it. And even if it's just 100 by 100 pixel grid, that photo of your mother is Like, you know it's her, it's imbued with meaning, and it's just 100 pixels, even black and white, it's nothing. But if it's random pixels, it has no meaning. So the larger complexity, it's also about meaning, it's also about decision space. The more decision space you have, the less life sucks. And I'm not talking about decision paralysis, like where you go to the grocery store and there's 100 types of peanut butter and you're like, oh, too many decisions, because that's also not the true decision space. You would also have the decision to not have to make the decision of which one would be the best peanut butter. But now I've gone on another tangent. I think more complexity, as long as it's less entropic, is good, and we know that as a feeling. We've all felt what it's like to have abundance and what it's like to not have abundance, and it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, or sometimes it manifests itself as a feeling of decay. You know, sometimes people feel this when they're not creating what they know they should be creating. There's this pit in your stomach that is trying to push you into creating this, what is ultimately adding more complexity to the universe.
Yeah.
And also, like, I mean, as far as we know, biological life is the only anti-entropic force in the universe. It seems like all matter is breaking down into simpler manifestations, but life is getting more and more complex, as we can see from single cell organisms to us sitting here right now. And of course, we experience this cosmic creative force that seems to push us along the way. Do you believe that we would ever be able to develop a machine or a robot that would also be receptive to this force of oneness that exerts its creative influence onto the world?
I have to borrow from Tom Campbell again, because I asked him this exact same question a few months ago, and the way he put it, hopefully I don't butcher it too much, but the way that we're all individuated units of consciousness in the one source that is everything. We're a free will awareness unit, and a free will awareness unit gets choices, and you can make what choice you want. Even if it's a very limited choice, you still have that. And of course, you could say that there's no free will and it's a determinism and you're just kind of on a train track. That thought model is right there. We're going to put it over here. Okay, very good. It's still on the table. Great. Now we've got the other one where you are nothing but free will, because it's either going to be one or the other. It's either there's no free will or you're nothing but free will. That's the whole thing. And you get to choose different experience packets based on what your soul or whatever needs. And you can come here as a panther or something. You can come as a rich human, a poor human. But eventually there's going to be individuated units of consciousness that want to play out experiences as an artificial, or from our perspective, artificial, because it's not carbon-based, it's silicon-based, but it's still the same neural connectivity. It's like, what are we, a trillion neurons or something like that? If it's the same neural map with the same free will awareness unit inside that body, who's to say that's not also a life? Not to say that whatever Elon is working on now is it, but...
Yeah, I mean, I've heard this idea that if a certain system... it achieves a certain level of complexity, then spirit will manifest itself in that system.
Yeah.
That it's just the complexity. It doesn't have to be complexity born of biological life. If we get the Goldilocks amount of complexity emerging in a machine, then this spirit will inhabit it. The ghost will go into the machine.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's a simple equation that if we arranged the neurons in like a certain crystalline structure or something that obeys the phi ratio. I know these are tired motifs and stuff. I know everything is flower of life and phi ratio and that, and it's not all about that, but I'm just using that as a placeholder. Like, what if it is something simple? I think that's an Einstein thing where he says that the universe should be like... it should boil down to a very simple geometric equation. Even if we don't have it yet, the solution is geometric and it is simple because it has to be. You can't start off at zero with a complex equation. Where do you get the complex equation from? It has to build up from the simplest fundamental yes, no, let there be light in the dark sort of thing.
But I want to get back to this idea of resistance, creative resistance. We're both fans of a book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, where he talks about resistance with a capital R, this force of entropy that we brush up against with every step we take on our creative path. So how do you stay generative and creative as you face the manifestations of resistance like procrastination and self-doubt and distraction? How do you fight resistance?
The biggest tool I have is to use that resistance as a compass. So you're never going to... A lot of people make the mistake of trying to feel different. And I know I already talked about you got to start at the feeling, so I'm going to be filled with contradictions, but really it's a layered answer of different angles to look at it. And you're trying to, like, I can't post this or I can't draw this because I'm not motivated. I need to get motivated. And you're never going to have that motivation you want as consistently as you want. It's a dragon to chase. Discipline is a better friend than motivation. Discipline is doing it like you are a robot. I like to visualize my higher self, like controlling this me as like an avatar where I just jump up to the 8th dimension and tell this 3D avatar, submit this file, pay that DMV fee, register this, and it's all shit I don't want to do, but it's like, yes, and I just do it, and then it's 2:00 and, oh, I did that stuff with no emotion tied to it. I robotically saw that the fear was saying, don't post that, it's cheesy, make it perfect, then post it. Then the other side of me said, no, you told yourself post every day, thus face it and mechanically just push the button. And I think that most of the time you're going to be right. Like if you're afraid of just posting swastikas and the N-word or something, like maybe that's right. Maybe you shouldn't be facing your fear. But most of the time I don't see myself as doing... The thing I'm afraid of posting is not something that is bad in that sense. I feel like it's as long as you're coming from a true place, and try to get weirder with it. I mean, it's 2020. Like you're afraid of posting your art or your music. If you're not going to post it now, when are you going to post it? It's beyond a futuristic date. Like 2012 is super futuristic in my head. Like 2020 is beyond the realm of... We're used to Donald Trump president. We're in a quarantine. There's the CNN and the Navy reports UFOs. Like it's done. It's the strangeness peak, and it's going to keep on peaking. So if you don't do it now, then, I mean, just do it. And also, it's not like if you don't do it right now, then it's over, because the art party never ends. The art party is forever, and there's always a party going on at every hour of the day. And there's never been a better time to find people that are into what you'd be doing. Like, think of doing this 20 years ago. Like, there was no Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Shopify, WooCommerce, Squarespace, Wix, all these tools that for some of them are free, some of them are $10 a month, and you can sell art and make a living from art without even having to ship anything. Like there's services that print your stuff on good poster paper. They frame it better than you would have. They wouldn't have gotten their fingerprints on the side of it and that kind of thing. So you can just focus on just art, and like that stuff can happen. It takes time to build the infrastructure, but it's never been a better time to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of your pieces, it says, if you're afraid to put something out, put out anything. And I think that that's a great encapsulation, because sometimes you need to just plow through the blank pages. You know, you need to take something that still might be incubating a little bit and just put it out there, because that's how you start the feedback loop of generation and response that then develops your artistic voice.
Yes. And we put the smash hit on a pedestal, whereas you look at your favorite albums, and your favorite song is most often not the single. Like the single is just something that the world or the record company or something decided. But on a personal, individual basis, we're all like, you know what my favorite track is on that record? Track 8. And then someone's like, really? Track 8? You're like, yep. I didn't like it at first, but then it became my favorite. And if you look at the the streams on it, it's less than the more popular ones. But you should, as artists, creative people, you should be contributing to your catalog, not just the smash hits, but put out some of those B-sides, put out some of those ones that 12 people like it, 2 people like it.
With the smash hits too, I've heard a lot of stories where a musician will put out a song not thinking it's very good, and that song becomes the smash hit.
Yep.
So you never know how the world's going to receive what you've created until you put it out there.
Yeah.
And of course you're going to confront fear, because it's bringing you into a place of vulnerability. It's bringing you into a place of judgment. If art is bearing your soul onto a piece of paper, then when someone judges that piece of art, in a way, they're judging your soul. And that can be an incredibly frightening thing. But that's the path of the artist.
Just that piece of your soul, though, not the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I haven't made this yet, but it's like an idea I sketched down. But it's based off of a Jimi Hendrix quote where he says, like, he's kind of depressed, and I think it's recounted by his girlfriend or something in their apartment. He's like, man, every time I play, I leave a piece of my soul behind. And first when I read that, I'm like, oh, that's so sad. And then I reframed it to think like, well, the soul is infinite. So if you leave a piece of your soul behind, no worries. I've got infinite more soul to put out. And every moment you're not putting it out, that's still a moment that passed. And I'm sure people listening to this, if you're making stuff, you will notice that the stuff you made 3 years ago, you would just never make that today. Like that was something that a you then could only make, not that you now makes. And a lot of people, it happens to me too. We get in this lie of like, oh, I feel like I'm a husk of who I was before, and I used to be filled with life, and now I'm depleted of life, and I'll never get that back. But you're looking at that version of yourself through this one. So you're actually both of them. You are that inspired one, and you're the husk. Thus, you're bigger than the one before. You can always tap into who you were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's still all embedded within you. It's just a matter of how you can get there within that narrative in your head. It's all about the narrative in your head. What are you doing in there? So many of us are not decorating the narrative in our head correctly because we let the outside get in there. And school is designed to beat it out of you. And we chose that path because that gets our fear muscles bigger. Not the fear muscle, the fear fighting muscles bigger. The path, the artist path, the path we chose in the higher dimension and in this 3D dimension. We chose it on that one, then we came down, then we chose it in that one, and so on. And if you're happy not finishing stuff, then you win. But if you're unhappy not finishing stuff, then just take that like piece of advice and dial it in a little more to the boundary execution state and finish things, because I recognize that's a problem. Like so many people can create stuff, but then they don't finish that last 20% because they're expecting that last 20% to go at the same rate that the first 80% went. And turns out that last 20% might actually be half of the game, and you were just mapping it out wrong in your head. Like you do the outline sketch, but then turns out the coloring part takes like longer than you thought because it looks ugly this way. It looks ugly this way. I need to change this. I need to do that. But it's, finishing stuff. And then it's your definition of finish. It's tough to tell someone when is something finished, because I know there's stories of Picasso, like a new art exhibit would be unveiled and then he would come down there and start finishing the things. Like he'd say, no, this is wrong. I got to change so he was never done. It's almost like every human being, like even though we put them on pedestals, they still had those flaws, whether they were mean or self-destructive. Like Alan Watts was a huge drunk, and like, not that I don't think he beat his family or anything, but who knows? There's people that they'd made great art and then beat their family. So there's still all these humans at the end of the day. Not that that's part of it. Not that in order to make good art, you must also have that shadow. It's like the shadow is there, but you should not give in to the shadow.
Do you often finish your pieces in one sitting?
Yes. Because the other way, it doesn't resonate with you, which there are exceptions. There's times where I'll be going through old notes when I just feel like doing that, and then I'll see something that's half done. I'm like, this still holds up. This could be a thing if I just finish this out. But most of the time, it's like with a song or something, while it's in your head, that's when you should do it, because when it's 2 weeks later, you've got a different thing playing in your head, and then you try to force yourself to finish that one, and you're like, I'm
the
not
wellspring is pushing something different. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with starting 1,000 things and only finishing one per every 1,000, as long as you're still, keeping up with what you want. But ultimately, you are going to want more. There's a Frank Zappa quote I bring up a lot where they ask him what his advice is, and he says, there are 2 things you need to do. The first is to not stop. The second is to keep going. And when you get there, you'll find that it's still tough. And when he said that line, I was like, damn, even him, like when he's there, it's still tough. And now this is like 10 years after hearing that quote, I'm like, I'm beyond where I imagined where I could be in terms of like, I'm doing what I love. I make money doing it. And now I'm on the CoSM podcast and all these other similar like little milestones you get. And you're like, oh, wow, it's still tough. I still have to figure out this thing's broken. There's like 100 emails I haven't replied to, etc. Like, should I expand my team? I don't want a team. I don't have a team. I don't want an assistant. I don't want those kind of things, but good problems to have. The problems don't end, and that's good.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, it's been so inspiring just watching you on your creative journey and just seeing all your content that you've put out. And thank you so much for being on the CoSM Podcast. I think that's a good place to wrap up. Now, where can people find you?
You can go to raminnazer.com. You can also go to rainbowbrainskull.com. I'm also active on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's all just my name, Ramin Nazer.
Ramin Nazer, thank you so much, man. This was a lot of fun.
My pleasure.
Thank you again for listening to the CoSM Podcast. To stay up to date on any future podcasts or virtual events, please be sure to follow Chapel of Sacred Mirrors on Instagram and Facebook, and to subscribe on all major platforms. And thank you to everyone who has donated during this time. Every donation is a stand for the future of CoSM and allows us to continue to bring inspiring and uplifting content like this to our community. And thank you to Smile High for the soundtrack to this podcast. You can find him by going to the links in the description to this video.